President of the Republic, President Halonen, President Niinistö, Speaker of the Parliament, Chairperson in Office, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ministers, Secretaries General, Excellencies, distinguished guests both here in Finlandia Hall and those watching this through our live streaming service. Once more, welcome to the Helsinki+50 conference, Respecting the Legacy, Preparing for the Future. It is a great pleasure for us to have you all here. We are more than 1,000 people here at Finlandia Hall from approximately 70 different countries, plus our online audience. Majority of us here today represent the civil society. My name is Mikko Koivumaa. I'm the Director General of Communications at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. Once more, welcome. A warm thank you to the choir Mieskuoro Huutajat, which in Finnish means, unsurprisingly, the screaming men's choir. And now that we have your undivided attention, it is time to move on with the program. As we are marking the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, signed in this very hall in 1975, one of the aims of this conference is to send a loud and clear message about the full respect of the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. I guess we can say, consider it done. Without further ado, I welcome to the stage the OSCE Chairperson in Office, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, Ms. Elina Valtonen, to give her opening remarks as the host of this conference. Minister, the floor is yours.
It's difficult to make an impression after this performance. Excellencies, dear participants, 50 years ago, something exceptional happened in Helsinki. In a Europe divided by ideological confrontation, the leaders of 35 countries from East and West gathered in this room to sign the Helsinki Final Act. This landmark document laid down 10 principles committing us all to respect the inviolability of borders, to resolve disputes peacefully, and to guarantee fundamental human rights to our citizens. What made this achievement groundbreaking was the recognition that security is not merely a matter between states. It is inseparable from the rights of individuals. The Final Act redefined security, expanding it beyond military considerations to encompass human rights, economic cooperation, and environmental protection. As Minister Jaakko Iloniemi, who led the CSE efforts on the Finnish side 50 years ago, and is here today, said, the goal was simply to open a small crack in the Iron Curtain. Yet the small crack became an opening, making room for a movement that helped reshape our continent. The Helsinki Final Act is a classic example of how contemporary judgment can be overtaken by events. In many respects, the true significance of the CSCE was only revealed with delay, and many of the originally critical voices have later changed their mind. A prime example was the US Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, who in the 1970s deemed the human rights basket of the Helsinki Final Act meaningless, famously stating, "They can write it in Swahili for all I care." He later acknowledged that it had in fact represented a turning point and started the eventual erosion of Soviet rule. At the heart of this transformation was civil society. Movements like Solidarity in Poland, Charter 77 in Czechoslovakia, Initiative for Peace and Human Rights in East Germany, and the Baltic Way showed us that the courage of ordinary citizens can shake even the mightiest empires. These brave individuals held their governments accountable using the words those regimes had endorsed in the Helsinki Final Act. One such voice was Lyudmila Alexeva, an exiled founding member of the Moscow-Helsinki group. In October 1985, she testified before the US Congress. For victims of human rights abuses in the Eastern Bloc, Helsinki remains the main source of hope and a rallying point in their struggle for freedom and peace. Just 4 years after she spoke these words, the Berlin Wall fell. This is the power of the Helsinki Final Act, not only in the signatures of heads of states, but in the hands and hearts of those who dare to believe that principles matter and that freedom is a right for everyone, not a privilege for a few. The legacy of the Helsinki Final Act lives in the landmark commitments of the 1990 Charter of Paris for a New Europe, the 1999 Istanbul Charter for European Security, and the 2010 Astana Commemorative Declaration. From this legacy emerged also the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, dedicated to turning these principles and commitments into reality. This year, Finland is honored to chair the OSCE. In 2021, President Sauli Niinistö, also with us here today, proposed marking this anniversary with the summit in the spirit of Helsinki, to promote genuine dialogue on security, human rights, and global challenges such as climate change. In February 2022, just months after Finland was confirmed as chair for 25, the possibilities for such a summit were shattered by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia's war of aggression violates every principle we are committed to, such as the respect for borders, sovereignty, and the renunciation of violence. Let me be clear. While the spirit of Helsinki has been challenged, the Helsinki principles remain unbroken. Across the OSCE region, we see the power of the Helsinki principles through the people. The brave Ukrainians have since 22 fought valiantly for their independence, but just as much for our values: democracy, the rule of law, freedom, and fundamental rights. The Ukrainians' fierce will to defend their country is a testament to their determination to live in liberty. From every corner of the OSCE region, people are united by a desire for peace, security, and freedom. This aspiration is not bound by time, place, or context. It's universal. In many countries, Russia's war of aggression has reawakened people's determination to work for a future rooted in democracy and a genuine independence from undue external influence. Ladies and gentlemen, anniversaries are moments for reflection, but also for renewal. In this spirit, the Finnish OSCE chairpersonship has initiated the Helsinki+50 discussions on the future of the OSCE, bringing together all participating states, partner countries, and representatives of civil society. From its early confidence-building measures to the work of its institutions and field operations, the OSCE has made significant contributions to conflict prevention, democratic development, human rights, and post-conflict reconciliation. But past achievements do not guarantee future relevance. We must seize this moment to make the OSCE more functional and more resilient. Later today, I will launch the Helsinki+50 Fund, a new initiative designed to improve the use of voluntary funding for the OSCE to deliver on its mandate, rooted in our shared principles and commitments. Esteemed guests, 3 immediate priorities stand before us. First, we must stand with Ukraine and hold Russia accountable for its war of aggression. The abducted children must be returned. War crimes must be meticulously documented. Those responsible must face justice. The war must end. It is the very foundation of the Helsinki principles we all uphold. Second, we must enact reforms within the OSCE to enable effective and timely decision-making. As an example, it is unacceptable that the organization has been operating without an approved budget since 2021. Without reform, the OSCE cannot fulfill its role. Third, we must uphold the core of this organization: shared commitments, open dialogue, and the voice of civil society, the lifeblood of democracy. Authoritarian regimes fear this voice, which is why they silence the media, dismantle institutions, and repress activists. When freedoms fade, so does human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Sorry. Supporting civil society is the foundation of the OSCE. I call on all participating states to respect this principle. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, the world has changed in 50 years, and most of the change has been for the better. The number of countries rated free has nearly doubled since 1973, when Freedom House started issuing Freedom in the World reports. In the OSCE area, the absolute number of independent, democratic, free countries has increased from around 15 to over 40. People live longer, are healthier, happier, and better educated. They are freer than ever to shape their own future. This is our guiding compass looking into the next 50 years. Freedom, democracy, human rights. Today, as we gather to mark the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, we reaffirm that Helsinki principles live on and that they cannot be silenced by force or intimidation. The power to tear down walls lies with the people. It always has, and it always will. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Valtonen, for this very inspiring speech. We now move on to the high-level keynotes. It is my honor to welcome to the stage the President of the Republic of Finland, Mr. Alexander Stubb. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Madam President, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, dear ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. In 2021, my predecessor, President Sauli Niinistö, proposed the idea of organizing a conference to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act and the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. The objective was to honor the spirit of Helsinki and to see how current and future security discussions would benefit from its legacy. 4 years ago, our understanding of the world was quite different from what it is today. Tension was already building. A growing number of world leaders seemed to be relying increasingly on power and coercion to achieve their aims, showing less and less respect for common rules and dialogue. Still, no one could have imagined that a European country would attack its neighbor without any provocation and start a full-scale war in the very heart of Europe. We could not have believed that a European country would try to expand its borders and take decisions on behalf of another country through the use of force. But then again, let's be honest with ourselves. Russia began this pattern already in August 2008 when it attacked Georgia. I witnessed it personally when helping to broker the ceasefire in my capacity as foreign minister and chairman of the OSCE at the time. The 24th of February 2022 marks a turning point in world history. We are living the 1918, 1945, and 1989 moment of our generation. We do not know where exactly the world is going, but we know that it's changing. There is no going back. Europe has changed as well, permanently, I would argue. Establishing any form of relations between Russia and the rest of Europe will only be possible after we have achieved a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. However, those new relations will look very different from the relations that existed before Russia started its war of aggression against Ukraine. We cannot turn back the tide of history. Russia violated the basic principles of international law. The role of the OSCE and its predecessor, the CSCE, in shaping European security is closely linked to modern European history. The conferences held here in Finland in 1975, 1992, and now in 2025 reflect different historical moments and their special characteristics. In 1975, in the Helsinki Conference, we found a new way of building post-war Europe together. The foundations for peace, the UN and the post-war world order had been laid already in Yalta in 1945. However, Yalta was based on the idea of winners and losers and spheres of interests of major powers. The Helsinki Final Act, on the other hand, was not about winners, losers, or the use of force. Instead, cooperation was to be built upon common principles, dialogue, and mutual respect. This is the essence of the spirit of Helsinki. We agreed on simple principles that we promised to follow, and I will read them, not shout them out. They included, among others, sovereign equality, respect for the rights inherent in sovereignty, the territorial integrity of states, the inviolability of frontiers, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. We agreed not to regard the future of Europe from the perspective of states only. Instead, we placed citizens, peoples, and universal human rights in the center. To make sure that the principles would hold, civil society in various countries started to get organized. They wanted to hold leaders accountable on the promises they made and build on competencies needed to guarantee those rights. In 1992, world leaders convened here in Helsinki again. And as a little anecdote, the Secretary General of that conference was Aleksi Härkönen. He was a diplomat in Washington at the time and was sent to organize things here. I had the privilege as a trainee to sit in his office in Washington, D.C. while he was absent. In 1992, of course, the Cold War was over. Capitalism had defeated communism. Freedom had defeated control. Democracy had defeated autocracy. Foundations were laid for a new institution, the OSCE. that would enable a more systematic promotion of common principles. The peaceful settlement of disputes emerged as one of the main tasks of the organization. The OSCE was given an important role as a platform for conflict prevention and resolution. After the Cold War, the OSCE put human security at the center of its actions. Security was interpreted broadly, with citizens and their rights at its core. The OSCE and its autonomous institutions achieved remarkable success in protecting minority rights, safeguarding media freedom, developing good governance, and defending the rule of law. Today, in 2025, these achievements, the jointly agreed principles, the comprehensive approach to security, and the ability to resolve conflicts peacefully, are under serious threat. At the same time, they're more important than ever before. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine not only breaches the common principles of the OSCE, but the demands by Russia to restrict the national sovereignty of another state challenge the European traditions of democracy and the rule of law in their entirety. Returning to a world order in which spheres of interests dominate would lead to a situation in which the citizens of independent, democratic states would not decide on their own affairs. Instead, the undemocratic leadership of another country would make those decisions. Security would no longer be based on people and their rights, but on the projections of power of the regimes of neighboring countries. In Europe, we are faced with an important decision. The choice is between Yalta and Helsinki, between spheres of interest and the use of force, or the sovereignty of states and common rules and principles. In Finland, the choice is crystal clear. We want to continue building a Europe relying on common rules and principles through dialogue and cooperation. We also have to walk the talk and take action. In Europe, we must defend these principles in everything we do. Breaches of common principles must not be tolerated, and aggression must be responded to. At the same time, we must ensure that the response to aggression does not violate the principles even further. Threats to democracy must not be countered with undemocratic means. The rules-based multilateral order is challenged globally as well. An increasing number of world leaders want to manage their affairs bilaterally and through ad hoc minilateral arrangements, transactionally. The threshold for the use of force has become lower, and the line between war and peace has become increasingly blurred. The civilians in Gaza, Sudan, and many other places are paying too high a price for this breakdown in the rules-based world order. We must also defend the multilateral order and established rules and principles globally, not only here in Europe. Even though the Helsinki Final Act was signed by states, perhaps its most significant achievements were gained through people and their cooperation. An increased understanding of fundamental human rights, and a willingness to build dialogue with people on the other side of the Iron Curtain, were the key contributors to the Cold War ending peacefully. I believe that now and in the future, people, cooperation, and dialogue will continue to lie at the core of European security. This conference and the extensive representation from different NGOs whom I have met today and will continue to meet reflect the commitment of Finland to develop European security at various levels. We consider citizens and all representatives of civil society to be an essential part of European security as we go forward. I hope that everyone taking part in this conference will find a meaningful way to engage in the discussions in the spirit of Helsinki. Even though the world has changed significantly in 50 years, the same rules still apply to basic human interaction. The best solutions can be found through dialogue and listening to one another. Joint solutions are harder to find, but they are also much more sustainable. Dear friends, exactly 50 years ago, here at the Finlandia Hall, President Urho Kekkonen noted that, and I quote, "Acknowledging existing facts does not mean submitting to the weaknesses of the present situation." End of quote. I agree. Accepting the facts as they are is the starting point of improving the situation. We all have a role in foreign policy. We all have agency in foreign policy. I encourage everyone to think about and envision what a new common future would look like. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, it is my great pleasure to welcome our next keynote speaker, the President of Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Zelenskiy. He will be addressing us online through a video connection, and as you know how video connections are, we need to give it a little time. So let's give a moment to establish the connection before we start listening to the President. Okay, Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Hundreds of Shaheed drones and also missiles. Our air defense shot down many of them, but not all, unfortunately. Once again, a Russian missile hit a residential building. A whole section of the building was turned into rubble and dust, just like the lives of the people who lived there. Across Kiev, dozens of people were injured in today's attack. There are fatalities, and sadly, the number of deaths is still rising. 2 days ago, Russia launched another cynical strike, this time on a prison in the Zaporizhzhia region. They used their drop bombs. They knew exactly it was a civilian. They knew the bombs would hit it. 16 people were killed, 43 were injured. Russia keeps launching such attacks even when the whole world is calling on it to stop the war. A war that Russia started, a war that Russia keeps dragging on, a war that only the Russian leadership wants a leadership stuck in another era. They are mentally stuck in another century, a time of brutal violence, devastations, total disregard for human rights and equality. We all know such ideas and such times must never return to Europe. And we all know how to protect ourselves from that, how to protect Europe from what today's Russia is bringing. And I believe Russia can be pushed to stop this war. it started it, and it can be made to end it. But if the world doesn't aim to change the regime in Russia, that means even after the war ends, Moscow will still try to destabilize neighboring countries. It will keep spending huge amounts of money, resources, maybe even lives to do so. One of Putin's main ideas, now it's mainstream in Russia, is that Russia has no that its borders are wherever it wants them to be. This is a total rejection of the post-World War II world. And this is the foundation of the current regime in Russia. And we in Europe will have to protect ourselves from this in the long term, and we will protect ourselves. And yes, Russia has seized a vast amount of land, not just recently, but over centuries of imperial expansion and aggression. But its real potential is far smaller than Europe's. Russia's technologies are worse. And most importantly, unlike Europe, Russia offers no way of life that people want to follow. That's why it will lose. Our main task is to stop Russia now and to do everything we can to grow our shared strengths in security, in economy, in technology, in social development. I'm grateful to everyone applying sanctions against Russia and preparing new ones. And we need to fully block Russia's war machine, cut off its arms industry, limit its energy profits, and finally put every frozen Russian asset, including the stolen wealth of corruption, to work defending against Russian aggression. It's time to confiscate Russian assets, not just freeze them, confiscate them and use them to serve peace, not war. I want to thank President Stubb for standing with Ukraine, for supporting our people, and for helping build a connection with President Trump. President Trump is truly interested in ending the war, and we have to do everything we can to make sure the United States and Europe act together for security. I thank all European leaders, every country that helps our defense, our air shield, our resilience. Ukrainians have been through a lot because we stand together with everyone who values life. And I'm sure the day will come when Ukraine will live in real peace, a time when we will not wake up every night to air raid sirens, a time when we restore safety and constitutional order in the territory that are currently occupied, a time when Russia will be forced to recognize its real borders. That time will come because Europe stays united. Ukraine is not alone, America is helping, and the world chooses life, not war. If we look back at the choice made in Helsinki 50 years ago, it was also a choice for life, not war. Thank you for your support. Please keep putting pressure on Russia for the sake of peace and invest in your own security. Slava Ukraini. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Zelenskyy, for these heartfelt words. And now our next keynote speaker is United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who is delivering his speech via a video message.
I'm pleased to send my warm greetings as you gather to mark the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act. I commend the OSCE Chair, Finland, for its leadership in convening this anniversary event. Half a century ago, the Helsinki Final Act charted a bold and visionary course for peace, rooted in dialogue, grounded in international law, and anchored in the fundamental rights and freedoms of all people. This year also marks the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter. The principles of our Charter and the OSCE are a shared foundation for peace and cooperation. But today, those principles are under grave strain. War continues to rage in the European continent. Trust between states is fraying. Human rights are under assault. Democratic space is shrinking. And disinformation is fueling division and fear. We are witnessing a dangerous drift away from commitments that have safeguarded peace for generations. Yet, in this moment of peril, the values enshrined in the UN Charter and echoed in the Helsinki Final Act, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and peaceful coexistence, remain our moral and strategic compacts. The role of the OSCE as a platform for dialogue and guardian of these principles is more vital than ever. The United Nations stands firmly with the OSCE in defending shared values, dialogue over division, cooperation over confrontation, and dignity for all. Let us recommit to the spirit of Helsinki by strengthening regional partnerships to renew multilateralism, by principled leadership to uphold international law, and by forging unity of purpose to build a future of mutual respect, resilience, and shared prosperity. Let us honor the milestone by renewing our commitment to a world anchored in peace, justice, and human rights. Thank you, and my very best wishes for a successful meeting.
Thank you, Secretary General Guterres. Now I welcome to the stage our next speaker, OSCE Secretary General, Ambassador Feridun Sinirlioglu. Please, Secretary General, the floor is yours.
President Stubb, Minister Valtonen, I thank you for your invitation to Helsinki. Excellencies, dear friends, being here in the very same room 50 years after our forefathers and foremothers, one could be tempted to talk about the past. Therefore, I am sure that we will continue to hear a lot today about what the Helsinki Final Act meant when it was signed. I hope that we will also hear about the successes of the Helsinki Final Act, an example of how adversaries, allies, neighbors, as well as countries with little in common, came together to agree on the fundamental principles that would guide their peaceful and prosperous coexistence. I hope that we will hear about the transformative powers of the Helsinki Final Act more. How little more than 1 year after the Helsinki Summit, Charter 77 promised to initiate a new era of civil liberties and freedoms, and how it was followed by many other movements that helped to expand and strengthen the democratic space on the continent. I hope we will hear about all that, because I am not going to talk about it. Today, rather than to talk about the Helsinki Final Act with my eyes on the past, I want to look to the future and talk about the next 50 years, the future security architecture that will ensure a better and safer order for our children and grandchildren. Together we are navigating through an increasingly difficult and uncertain period. Our collective security architecture, which our founding fathers and mothers built over decades of hard work, with sometimes a high cost, is in shambles before us. The current state of our fundamental norms and principles is the biggest challenge in front of us today. Once rules do not matter to some, they won't matter for anyone, and that becomes a problem for everyone. This cannot be the new normal. Therefore, when it comes to principles, they should be applied to everyone, inside and outside of the OSCE region, period. Selectively applying rules and exceptions erodes international law. We must stand against aggression everywhere it is perpetrated, by whomever it is perpetrated. We must stand against genocide and war crimes in every context. We must combat impunity before it takes root. Double standards are eroding the fundamental principles that are our foundation. We need to be able to rely on them. The 50 years of work from the OSCE and the 80 years of work from the United Nations is all being undermined. We see across the OSCE region desecration of or dismantlement of monuments, religious symbols, and even cemeteries. If we want to build solid foundations for the next 50 years of peaceful coexistence, history needs to be learned, not rewritten. Excellencies, dear friends, yesterday, Pope Leo renewed his appeal for peace in the world and stated the following, and I quote, "Today, more than ever, it is imperative to cherish the spirit of Helsinki, persevere in dialogue, strengthen cooperation, and make diplomacy the preferred way to prevent and resolve conflicts." End of quote. If there is one lesson that we can draw from this reference to the spirit of Helsinki, is this: dialogue is always possible. The only prerequisite to dialogue is a space to exercise that. You, the participating states, have created that. It was designed here in Helsinki in 1975. It was built on in the following decades. You have created by consensus the OSCE to hold that space. Now is the time to use it, to invest in it, to utilize it as a platform for meaningful, open, transparent, and structured diplomatic dialogue. Now more than ever before, we need this platform to address the many challenges facing the participating states and the partners for cooperation. However, dialogue requires both talking and listening. That's engagement. It is unfortunate that today there appears to be very little appetite for engagement. Yes, people are speaking, but talking past each other or talking across each other is not the same as speaking with each other. If you want a real conversation, you have to listen and hear each other as well. That's why it is high time to return to the meaningful, respectful engagement envisaged by our forefathers and foremothers here 50 years ago. Let us recall that this organization was born at a time when the threat of mutually assured destruction was at the fore of everyone's mind. Frankly, these capabilities have only increased since 1975, and their presence continues to pose a global existential threat. Therefore, to use a reference to them as a threat is unacceptable. Hence, to forego engagement is to play with fire. Security cannot and will never be guaranteed by military deterrence alone, because military deterrence alone can lead to an arms race and be destabilizing. Therefore, security must also be ensured through cooperation, which requires dialogue. That is the living legacy of Helsinki. Excellencies, dear friends, this anniversary should serve as a brief reflection moment, a moment to pause before we reach the precipice and redirect our course towards building a new security architecture that will once again serve us all. In order to do that, I will say this again, I believe we need three crucial steps. First, we need to end the wars, Of course, when it comes to the OSCE region, that first and foremost means in Ukraine. We have seen in recent weeks and months glimmers of diplomatic engagements for a ceasefire. It is our duty to support efforts towards a negotiated settlement to end the war and encourage the sides to continue meeting and agree on further confidence-building measures, including the release of prisoners and repatriation of Ukrainian children. In this regard, I want to stress once again publicly my call that these initiatives should include our three OSCE officials, Vadim Golda, Maxim Petrov, and Dmitry Shabanov. After 3 years, their families continue to endure unspeakable anguish and pain and deserve to hold their loved ones again, as do far too many families of prisoners. Secondly, we need to recommit to the fundamentals. Our shared Helsinki principles must continue to live and guide us through these difficult times. I cannot imagine a stable and reliable security system in our geography and beyond, where fundamental ideas like sovereign equality and territorial integrity of states or respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms are not at the core. We need to vigorously recommit to the principles we place as the foundation of the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act. And then we need to actively implement them every day in every way we can. We need these principles, and we need the house we built to defend them. That is, we need the OSCE. Thirdly, we need an honest discussion on how we got here, what went wrong, and I repeat, honest discussions. When a system crumbles in the manner that we are witnessing right now, there needs to be some soul-searching, an open-minded review to investigate the reasons for collapse. We all bear responsibility for mistakes, misinterpretations, hubris, and indeed silence. A meaningful security discussion will need to include an honest assessment of what we did wrong, what we condoned, which should not have, and what we underestimated. We need to go through that together and listen to each other. Excellencies, dear friends, globally and in Europe, we have reached a critical juncture. The choices we make in the coming weeks and months will determine what the world of our future generations will look like. 50 years ago, despite our differences and our conflicting interests, we came together and found a common ground. There is no doubt that today's geopolitical situation is challenging, but geography has not changed and will not change. 50 years ago, there was a recognition of what was needed, a security platform for mutual accountability, dialogue, and collective action in Europe. We still need that today. And mark my words, we will need it for the next 50 years. This platform is the OSCE. Let us make full use of it. The alternative would be an affront to the men and women who made history in this very room 50 years ago. The alternative would be an affront to the women and men who will stand in this room 50 years from now. I thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Our next speaker is United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk. Mr. Turk, welcome to the stage.
Mr. President, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear friends. It is obviously a very great pleasure to be here with you today in the beautiful and warm city of Helsinki to mark this important anniversary. And I'm particularly moved to be in the very hall where the Helsinki Final Act was signed 50 years ago. Today, amid conflict and crisis, as the world seems more fragmented than ever, I pay tribute to the leaders of the time from East and West who came together to sign the Helsinki Final Act here in 1975. Helsinki has a special meaning for me. I spent my childhood in Vienna and Linz in Austria in the shadow of the Iron Curtain. The border between Austria and Czechoslovakia at the time was just 30 kilometers from my home. It is difficult for young Europeans to imagine how I was haunted by the barbed wire fence, the watchtowers, the guards, and the guns. Even as a small child, I knew people who had been killed trying to cross the border. And as I grew up, I understood that this eerie no man's land embodied a much bigger threat. I would often wake up at night, anxious about the possibility of nuclear war. When I heard the song Russians by Sting, calling for a common sense on either side of the political fence, I pictured that border. Finally, someone was talking about the simple human emotions that override ideological differences. In 1985, when Sting recorded Russians, the Helsinki process was 10 years old and its influence was growing. The spirit of Helsinki encouraged openness and cooperation. States started to inform each other about troop movements and military exercises, but its most important principle, what it set apart from other treaties, was that the Helsinki Final Act recognized a comprehensive concept of security, including a human dimension that goes far beyond an absence of war. The Helsinki spirit put human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, at the heart of peace and security. It provided a path out of ideological divisions and towards greater freedoms, freedoms of thought, of expression, of peaceful assembly, of movement, and the right to leave and return to one's own country. It gave hope to human rights defenders and dissidents across Europe, and it focused on ways to unite rather than divide. The Helsinki process played an important role during the end of the Cold War. It was a platform for dialogue based on mutual respect and clear channels of communication. As the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe was transformed into the OSCE in 1990, the cause of advancing human rights was the golden thread that brought its participating states together. Since 1990, the OSCE has played an important role in promoting stability in Europe through its work in the Western Balkans, in Transnistria, and in the Caucasus. You have helped strengthen democracy, advance cooperation, and promote comprehensive security by encouraging, for instance, dialogue among parliaments. Your role in observing elections has helped make them fairer and more trustworthy. Your field operations and institutions, the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the High Commission on National Minorities, the Representative on Freedom of the Media, play a vital part in the human rights ecosystem in the vast area stretching between Vancouver and Vladivostok. And now, 50 years after the Helsinki Final Act, powerful forces are at work, undermining multilateralism, flouting international law, and attacking global institutions and frameworks that were painstakingly created over decades for the benefit of all. This anniversary is indeed an opportunity to revitalize the Helsinki spirit and work for dialogue and solidarity as the foundation of peace and security in Europe and around the world. Today's theme, Respecting the Legacy, Preparing for the Future, calls on us not only to celebrate the enduring achievements of the Helsinki Final Act, but to apply their lessons to the challenges of today and tomorrow. My office and the OSCE have a very strong partnership through regular meetings and consultations. We share profound concerns around issues from conflict prevention to media freedom, gender equality, human trafficking, freedom of expression, the human rights impact of the climate crisis, and the protection of the rights of minorities. The human rights at the heart of the Helsinki process are a roadmap and a compass to rebuild trust and guide us towards solutions. Human rights are a factor of stability and resilience, and I welcome Finland's emphasis on resilience during its chairpersonship of the OSCE. In our turbulent times, amid levels of uncertainty and volatility, human rights are the voice of reason and compassion. They counterbalance the empty salutary of some of today's leaders and constrain the abuse of power. Human rights give us the self-confidence to confront prejudice and to right historic wrongs. And they are a tool for systemic, sustained change that benefits everyone. And I see three areas for our joint focus in the coming years. First, respect for human rights helps to prevent conflict and mitigate its impact on civilians. The root causes of conflict often lie in inequalities and human rights violations and are fueled by dehumanization, discrimination, shrinking civic space, and the targeting of minorities. We see these dynamics today in Gaza, in Sudan, and elsewhere. We need to invest much more at the national and global levels in heeding early warnings and in building peace by investing in dialogue and confidence-building measures. Human rights also show the way out of conflict by insisting on accountability, by putting people at the center of mediation and peace-building. My office is working for these goals around the world. Our work raises the alarm bells, helps to prevent abuses and violations, and documents them when they take place. And I would like to give you two examples. In Ukraine, we have detailed the appalling cost of Russia's full-scale invasion, which has escalated this year with a serious increase in civilian casualties, as we have just heard also from the President. My office has verified repeated patterns of torture and the cruel and inhuman treatment of Ukrainian prisoners in Russian captivity. We also continue to report on Russia's illegal imposition of its governance system in the territory it occupies and on the climate of fear created by widespread human rights violations there. But I also want to mention the occupied Palestinian territory, where after the horrific 7 October attacks committed by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, our reporting has kept a spotlight on the huge number of civilians, deaths in the Israeli bombardments of Gaza, the repeated forced displacement, the unlawful restrictions imposed on the entry and distribution of humanitarian aid, the killings of people seeking food, and attacks and harassments of Palestinians by Israeli settlers and security forces in the occupied West Bank. It is clear that that war must also end. The hostages must be released. Israel must end its unlawful presence, and there must be accountability for all violations of international human rights and international humanitarian law. We are on the ground in many other situations. I've only mentioned two: Sudan, Myanmar, Haiti, and beyond. And this detailed, meticulous work that shines a light on abuses and violations that would otherwise remain hidden. The second area for our joint focus, human rights, provides a lens to tackle the big issues of our time, such as the climate crisis, and protect people from its impact. When we look to the future, we know the climate crisis will be one of our biggest multiplier of security risks, especially around competition for water and other scarce resources. The extraction and burning of fossil fuels are trapping humanity in a furnace, and the countries and people that contributed least to global heating are suffering its worst effects. Human rights call for justice. Those responsible for the climate crisis need to pay up. And we need new creative sources to fund climate action and a serious reform of the global financial architecture so that all countries can access finances they need. The recent advisory opinion issued last week by the International Court of Justice on the obligations of states regarding climate change affirms what many of us have long argued. Governments have a clear human rights obligation under international law to address the climate crisis. Third, respect for human rights is the best guarantee for progress in every society. Creativity and innovation are not possible without free speech, dissent, the right to peaceful protest, academic freedoms, and respect for science. But today, more and more governments in every region are cracking down on these freedoms. It is frightening to see that the tools of repression are back with a vengeance, in places we would never have expected to see them. Human rights activists, lawyers, journalists, civil society groups are threatened, harassed, targeted by disinformation, and some governments are also using new technologies to reach across borders to intimidate, to abduct, and even kill opponents and critics. Meanwhile, poorly regulated social media platforms are silencing some people and communities. Women and girls, people with disabilities, and minorities of all kinds suffer disproportionate harassment and abuse online. We need an open public space for debate, which is backed by free and independent media. And I welcome Finland's decision to prioritize gender equality, inclusion, and engagement with civil society, as the Minister just mentioned. So 50 years on, this is an important opportunity to revive the Helsinki spirit and the principles of the OSCE. The need for cross-border cooperation on building sustainable peace and security and protecting all human rights has never been greater. For the world to move forward together in peace, we must heed the lessons of the past with Helsinki at their heart. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner, for your remarks. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage our next and last keynote speaker, Interim Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, Mr. Federico Borrello. Mr. Borrello, the floor is yours.
It will be hard to come after all these speakers, but I'll do my best. Thank you, President Stubb and Foreign Minister Valtonen, for the invitation to speak at this important event. It's wonderful and moving to be in Helsinki and to speak in the Finlandia Hall, the very place where the Helsinki Final Act was signed 50 years ago. I'm grateful to you, Foreign Minister Valtonen, for bringing us together to reflect on the past and think about the future. We also appreciate your steadfast focus on human rights during this year chairing the OSCE, especially, as you have just said, as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine continues to challenge the very foundation of our common security. This event is special for me and my colleagues at Human Rights Watch. For us, this milestone is not just an important reminder of a key set of principles that shape human rights in Europe. It is much more, as the Helsinki Accords and what followed are part of the DNA of our organization. As we know, it was the focus of the Accords on Human Rights that drew special attention at the time. All participating states committed to, and I quote, respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief for all. The Soviet Union was among those that embraced the accords, at least on paper. They were published in full into major media outlets there, Pravda and Izvestia. Many Soviet citizens decided to take their government at their word, with a simple and courageous act of standing up for their rights. Meetings were held, pamphlets were written and shared. Despite the obvious dangers activists formed into groups using the label Helsinki as a sign of hope and a shield for protection. The Moscow-Helsinki group, for instance, was formed only a few months after the signing in this hall, shortly followed by other Helsinki groups in Soviet Ukraine, Lithuania, and Georgia. Almost immediately, Soviet authorities started harassing and arresting group members, even driving them into exile. Thankfully, the actions of these courageous citizens did not go unnoticed. In New York, a group of lawyers, journalists, and writers was so inspired they set up their own Helsinki Watch to shed light on human rights abuses in the Soviet Union, put it on the agenda of the US government, and be in solidarity with the Helsinki groups there. It is this Helsinki Watch, this group of men and women in New York, that has over almost 50 years evolved into the global organization that is now Human Rights Watch. The idea of a spirit of Helsinki was discussed after the conference in this hall 50 years ago. It has been mentioned again today. For me, the spirit of Helsinki means that the accords are a guarantee of a right to speak the facts and uphold everyone's human rights, particularly when citizens are under pressure to do the opposite, to shut up and to not resist. So what does such an understanding mean in practice, today and in the future? For me, it underlines three things: the essential link between security and human rights, the universality of human rights, and the importance of the OSCE being a resilient organization able to help protect human rights in the future. First, there is no doubt about the seriousness of the security situation in Europe. As we have heard, Russia commits war crimes and other violations of the laws of war on a regular, almost daily basis in Ukraine. As the Finnish chairpersonship has emphasized, accountability for these crimes is vital to deter future aggression, to deliver justice for victims, and not least, to bolster international humanitarian norms for the security of all in the OSCE and beyond. The connection between security and human rights has many dimensions. Some OSCE participating states appear to be making concerning trade-offs, prioritizing security over human rights, and making deep cuts in social spending in order to increase military budgets. These are false dichotomies. As we know, the OSCE's concept of a human dimension of security depends on respect for human rights and the democratic institutions that protect them. In addition, at this time of heightened questions and tensions about the international political order, we need a renewed commitment to international norms and treaties, rather than a retreat from them. This includes safeguarding the standards adopted to prevent civilian suffering in war. We have followed with concern how 5 EU members, sadly including our host country Finland, are withdrawing from the landmark international treaty prohibiting anti-personnel landmines. While we understand the security concerns, walking away from the convention will put their own civilians and others at risk, and not just in times of war. And this is why we urge these governments to reconsider this step. Second, the focus of the Helsinki Accords on the universality of human rights. The rising human rights violations across the OSCE region are alarming. I spoke about the crackdown that happened 50 years ago against courageous activists in the Soviet Union. In the post-Soviet era, the Kremlin's pressure on critical voices inside Russia has never been fiercer than today. Further, in Central Asia, Belarus, and Azerbaijan, abuses of fundamental rights are widespread and in some areas escalating. In Georgia, government repression against the political opposition, civil society, and protesters is rapidly worsening. In Turkey, the government is carrying out a fully fledged assault on the political opposition, civil society, and the media. And rights are under pressure elsewhere too. Hungary's government has hollowed out democracy with curbs on judicial independence, media freedom, and civic space. The new US government appears to be on a similar path. Civil society space and the right to protest are under serious pressure in many parts of Western Europe, especially for those protesting climate change and standing up for Palestine. Media freedom faces threats too. We just published a report about the shocking interference by the Greek government in editorial decisions in public media and pressure on independent journalists. These efforts have one thing in common. They chip away at checks and balances on executive power and in turn put human rights at risk. And they send a signal to other states that such actions are acceptable, maybe even the new normal. And that runs counter to the spirit of the Helsinki Final Act. Participant states need to act decisively to stop these abuses. As part of this, they need to focus on supporting civil society. This means opposing legislation such as foreign agents laws that stigmatize independent civil activism, protecting civil space and funding for civil society organizations, and valuing, not prosecuting, human rights defenders. In this context, we thank the Finnish government for announcing that supporting civil society is a focus of the new Helsinki+50 fund being launched today. Third, we need a strong OSCE to reinforce human rights protection in our region. Participating states should be bold in using the tools at their disposal to bring human rights abusers to account and to signal that the accords on which this organization was built still apply to all. We need the OSCE's independent structures now more than ever. The Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the Representative on Freedom of the Media, and the High Commissioner on National Minorities have renowned and urgently needed expertise. They do vital work, and they deserve continued support. To end, the challenges we face today are no less serious than the ones we faced 50 years ago. Let's use this occasion to pull together, to defend our rights and freedoms, to strengthen democratic institutions and norms, to be ambitious and rise to the challenge we have received from those who, in the spirit of Helsinki, responded bravely to the accords signed here 50 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borrello, and thank you again to all our keynote speakers. You have delivered us many important messages and many inspiring thoughts around the Helsinki Final Act and its meaning today. And this concludes our keynote session. Before moving to our first panel discussion, we want to hear something from you, dear participants, both here on the spot and online. For that purpose, I now ask everyone to please take out your phones. On the screen behind me, you can see a QR code. Please scan the code with your camera. This will allow you to access our online platform through which you will be able to participate in the discussion